starten even.
Hereby I open this academic ceremony in which Maurizio Crupi will defend the academic thesis entitled A Pragmatic Approach to the Link to Origin, EU PDOs and PGIs for Registration, Innovation and Trade in Origin Products. Dear candidate, may I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis.
Highly esteemed Pro-Rector, highly esteemed members of the Corona, dear colleagues, family, and friends. Thank you for being here today. In the upcoming 15 minutes, I will provide you with a short overview of my work. My dissertation is about food, a topic that everyone in this room is familiar with. More precisely, I will present you my findings concerning the difference between protected designation of origin, PDOs, and protected geographical indications, PGIs. But what do we mean with these acronyms? PDOs and PGIs are quality schemes adopted by the EU in order to differentiate food products on the basis of the strength of their link to origin. In particular, PDOs have a stronger link than PGIs. They require a mandatory combination of natural and human factors, and all the production steps need to take place in the area. A look at the UGI register shows that at the very beginning of the system there were more PDOs registered than PGIs. Then starting from 2006, there has been an inversion in this trend and PGIs became predominant. So taking into account what we said before, that PGIs have a looser link to origin, can we say that the system is loosening its link to origin just by looking at EU quality schemes? Or can we say something else and say, are the differences between PDOs and PGIs in the legal requirements of due regulation somehow reflected in the practice of the UGI register? In order to answer to this question, I've conducted my research analyzing EU and non-UGIs and their amendments. And I will provide today an overview of these findings together with some reflections on the recent proposal by the European Commission for regulation for the protection of craft and industrial products. Starting with EU products, I've conducted an analysis of over 1,300 single documents, trying to better understand their link to origin. This through a directed content analysis and the use of software Atlas TI that allowed me to develop a code structure. You can see on the top of the code structure all the main linking factors that are the one defined in the text of the regulation. And then we can go deeper in the analysis by reading the single text of the documents and highlighting all the times that a certain element, like for example temperature, has been identified as a linking factor. In this sense, counting all the times that the temperature was used, for example, as a linking factor and distinguishing between PDOs and PGIs, it's possible to come out with a chart similar to this one. Coming to natural factors, for example, we might expect that PDOs have way more occurrences than PGIs because the expression natural factors is expressly indicated in the text of the regulation. But this is not like what I found. In the sense, the difference here between PDOs and PGIs, apart from some codes, seems quite blurred. In addition, there are over 200 PGIs that have all the production steps coming from the area of production, which is a requirement that is typical of PDOs. Mainly this happens for fruit and vegetables. And also around 50% of the PDOs for processed meat products, mainly ham, have raw materials coming from outside the area of origin. And this is something that clashes a bit with the definition under Article 5.1 of the regulation. What are the possible reasons for these findings? But first of all, PDOs and PGIs have the same template. So producers tend to fill in the template with all the information they have available without making any distinction. PDOs and PGIs have the same legal protection, so there's not really incentive for producers to opt for a specific quality scheme. I found also, back in the days with the early registered products, a wrong interpretation made by the Italian authorities regarding the link to origin for PDOs, which allowed the registration of PDIs with a very strong link to origin. And also the exception under Article 5.3 of Regulation 1151/2012 loosens the link to origin for PDOs, allowing the raw material to originate from outside the area of production. That's why I could conclude and examine that there's indeed a blurred difference between PDOs and PGIs. But what happens with the amendments, so the modifications of these single documents? In my methodology, I focused on processed meat products because they have a combination of raw materials and method of production to link their origin to the place. And I've analyzed all the amendments according to 3 labels: more flexible, stricter, or both, depending whether these amendments were giving more or less flexibility to producers. Again, I developed a code structure, focused in particular on raw materials and method of production. We can see that PDOs adopted a more conservative approach. So it seems that the amendments regarding PDOs for processed meat products tend to be more conservative in the sense of protecting more the traditional element, the traditional production. On the contrary, PGIs have a different approach, a more flexible one. 4 PGIs out of 30 analyzed allow the raw materials to come from outside the area of production. They changed something that at the beginning it was defined for the raw materials to come from inside the area. This result connected with what I said before of the blurred difference between PDOs and PGIs, and the fact that some PGIs, some products that could have qualified for PDOs and did register for PGIs, make us think that it's possible for the future that there will be a certain loosening of the link to origin for these products by way of amendments, as happened for these PGIs. After having considered EU products, EU GIs for agricultural products and foodstuff and their amendments, I moved my attention to non-EU GIs, and in particular the bilateral agreements. Here I wanted to consider both EU GIs included in the list and non-EU ones. Starting with EU GIs, my question was whether the quality scheme, PDO or PGI, had somehow an influence, an impact on the choice of the products. The answer is negative. The choice of these products is a choice made by the European Commission and during the negotiations, trying to privilege the more, let's say, some trade reasonings, trying to privilege those products that are most often exchanged with their countries that are in need of actual legal protection outside the EU. Looking at the list, we can see that there are around 70 products that are present in almost all the bilateral agreements in all this list. These are the national champions of every member state. And also the ratio between PDOs and PGIs in the list is equivalent to the ratio of PDO PGIs that are included in the UGI register. But what happens with non-UGIs? Here we can refer to Article 11, Paragraph 2 of Regulation 1151/2012 that allows this product containing bilateral agreements to enter in the UGI register. Of course, if this might happen in the future, it has to be decided whether these products will be PDOs or PGIs. And the text of the article says that without being specifically identified as PDOs, these products will enter in the register as PGIs. Therefore, potentially blurring even further the difference between PDOs and PGIs, since there is no reference in this bilateral agreement of any quality scheme. So far, it's also important to notice that very few products have been registered in the e-Ambrosia database. But there's an interesting thing to consider. that is the bilateral agreement with China. In particular, here, Article 5 of this bilateral agreement states that the Chinese GIs shall be incorporated in the relevant EU register. And the choice of whether this Chinese product will enter as PDOs or PGIs will be done on a product-by-product basis. Looking at the product that has been registered so far, 110, we have 99 PGIs and only 4 PDOs. And these 4 PDOs belong to the first batch of 10 products registered. So it seems that the European Commission actually registered all the products as PGIs. And what will happen with the next batch, 175 products? Well, it's possible to consider that also this product will be registered as PGIs. So all non-UGIs in the register will be basically PGIs. But still, there are some PDOs, very few. Why this happens? This happened, in my opinion. Well, we have to consider 2 elements. One is the nature of the GI system of the third country. It's possible that if the third country adopted a twofold link to origin, then it's possible that producers are willing to keep the same quality scheme also when they enter in the EU. And also the nature of the application, whether these PDOs are registered by way of direct application or via the competent authorities. This is possible in the second scenario, that there will be a more careful analysis of the dossier and therefore also a push for a PDO. That said, having considered that the difference between PDOs and PGIs is somehow blurred, after having conducted analysis of the UGIs and their amendments and also non-EU ones, it's time to consider the recent proposal by the European Commission, the regulation for craft and industrial products. I was quite surprised in reading that the option followed by the Commission is to give a single link to origin, a PGI one. But indeed, the link to origin for non-agricultural products might work well also on the basis of other factors that qualify as PDOs. We can think of natural goods like marbles and stone. These are terroir itself. So what else we can say that it will be a perfect candidate for a PDO indeed. In the analysis of the objectives I've conducted based mainly on a clearer and simple information to consumers, also a strong link to origin, and a possibility to foster international trade, I came out with the conclusion that the best option, in my opinion, is to keep this twofold link to origin. This for various reasons. One is a matter of consistency, which has came in place for agricultural products and foodstuff. Also, in order to give more information to consumers, depending on the strength of the link of the product they are going to buy. And also the possibility to use the 2 schemes as a kind of quality fragmentation, using a PDO for a product with a stronger link to origin, maybe a craft product, and a PGI for a more industrialized variant of it. I can think, for example, of the aceto balsamico di Modena PGI and the aceto balsamico tradizionale di Modena registered as a PDO. 2 products that seem similar, but indeed are so different among themselves. In conclusion, of course, the problem of the blurred difference between PDOs and PGIs might easily replicate also for non-agricultural products. That's why, in my opinion, there are some steps to be taken. First of all, I think it will be really important for the Commission to give more detailed guidelines in order to allow all operators in the sector to understand the difference between the 2 quality signs. So far, online are available guidelines of 20-25 pages, nothing compared to the very extensive guidelines of the UIPO, for example, that counts thousands of pages about the practice of the office. The template itself can be changed. Indeed, this section on the link to origin might be way more structured, defining the specificity of the territory, the specificity of the product, and the link between the 2, as it was done in the previous template. It will be possible to focus on raw materials. Therefore, dedicating PDOs to those products where the raw materials come from the area of production, or at least giving a point of reflection when there's a PGI with all the raw materials coming from the place to consider whether it will be a suitable candidate for a PDO. And finally, the use of the logo that in the proposal of the Commission is just done on a voluntary basis. In my opinion, it will be important to consider whether it can be opted for a compulsory use, these both in line with what is done for agricultural products and foodstuff, and also to increase the visibility of the system. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for your presentation. The opposition will be opened by Professor Heath. Professor Heath is Professor of Intellectual Property Foundations, Institutions and Adjudication at our university, and he is also the chair of the Assessment Committee.
Thank you very much. Esteemed candidate, I had the privilege of reading all the comments made in the course of assessing your thesis and in discussing your thesis with the other members of the assessment committee, and we all found that we will have so many questions to you, which is an indication of how academically stimulating your thesis is. And of the many questions that I have, let me choose one to ask you. You mentioned in your thesis, just as now in your presentation, the protection of non-EU GIs by way of bilateral or multilateral, mostly bilateral agreements. You mentioned that this protection works via a sort of annex to an international agreement. They are listed, and you also mention they are not necessarily put into the register. So this is a bit my question. First, do get the owners of these GIs, the foreign owners of these geographical indications, do they really get what they are promised by the bilateral agreement? In that, is it clear to what extent these indications will be protected? These may be non-food GIs. These may be GIs that collide with third-party rights in the European Union. Do they get the protection they were promised by a bilateral agreement? And vice versa, what is the protection, for example, trademark owners get in the European Union when they find suddenly, or maybe they may not even find, that there is a GI somewhere popping up in a bilateral agreement in a hidden annex that is in conflict with, for example, a European trademark or a different European right. Is that a fair and transparent system for the protection of non-EU GIs within the ambit of the community?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your question that indeed allows me to develop further the content of Chapter 3. Indeed, I share your concern regarding the protection of this product in bilateral agreements. In particular, what surprised me and pushed me also to consider non-agricultural products was the fact that there was no sui generis GI system, and still there's no sui generis GI system for protection of non-agricultural products. But some bilateral agreements indeed made reference to non-agricultural products. So the one with Peru and Colombia, for example. In this text, it's interesting to note that there's an annex of these products of the third country, and by reading in the line of the agreements, it's not specified how the protection will be ensured. Of course, by not of a sui generis GI right, because there's nothing equivalent to that. And that, of course, is a problem. We might assume that will be done a similar protection to the one already in place for non-agricultural GIs in the EU, for EU products. Then considering trademark owners. The lack of transparency of these agreements has been widely criticized. Recently, the work of the Commission has been done in order to create a database, GI View, where all this information can be more easily accessible. Still some work has to be done, for sure, because it's not so easily accessible. It's always necessary to read the content of each bilateral agreement to understand the extent of protection that the term might have in the EU, considering some generic expressions, for example. What is also interesting to consider is that there's an objection period of 2 months, while for EU GIs is 3 months, so there's a little gap of 1 month for this objection period. But there's, to my knowledge, there's no tool, no mechanism to help the trademark owners to oppose this list after that period. Nothing like cancellation system that is in place, for example, for trademarks. Indeed, by reading the text of this agreement, there's always a committee by way it's possible every year or 2 years, or depending on the situation, to renegotiate this list. So, to my understanding, the position that is taken so far is the one of privileging GIs compared to trademarks, and then to possibly rediscuss this, but not on by way of private action, let's say, but more at the level of bilateral negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you satisfied with the answer?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much. In that case, the opposition will be continued by Professor De Santis. Professor De Santis is Professor of Intellectual Property Law at the University of Alicante, and also a member of the Assessment Committee. And I would like to welcome him very much to Maastricht University today. Very good to have you.
Thanks very much. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today. I wouldn't have missed this ceremony at any rate, and we will recall this ceremony for the next 40, well, let's say for the next 20 years, would be enough. So thank you very much also for the invitation. This is a remarkable work, and I would like also to praise Professor Kamperman-Sanders, Professor Montero, and Professor Morland. You are very courageous. When I read first time the thesis, I was overloaded by data, by conclusions, by moving from one point to another point. It is only when I read it the second time that I realized what was really behind the thesis. Yeah. And behind the thesis, I didn't find a pragmatic approach. Behind the thesis, what I found is a clear statement: the system does not work. And this is what really appealed. It's the appealing fact of a doctoral thesis. No? That's why I'm convinced that the registry does not work, and you show it clearly. Perhaps the European Commission should be aware that they have to change the way they are moving, probably moving into a registry where they have actual professionals devoted to this, probably not in Brussels, in another place all around Europe, I'm not going to mention. But losing the link of origin for PGA products brings me to the conclusion that what you want to say really, and please let me know whether this is true or not, it's just that the system does not work. And we have to rebuild the system in a way or another. I have just a question for you, which has more, I was more appealed, let's say, when reading the thesis again and again, to the relationship with trade, the relationship with innovation, the relationship with non-agriculture products, but also you mentioned at a certain point the relationship with traditional knowledge. No? And I would like you to reflect a little bit more on the relationship between the protection of non-agricultural products with traditional knowledge, taking into account that it's more than 20 years that the Intergovernmental Committee on IP and Genetic Resources, Traditional Knowledge, and so on and so forth is in WIPO trying to put forward for a treaty or for several treaties that are very, very closely related to your topic. So in conclusion, congratulations first. You are very courageous. You have brought some conclusions. I've read your conclusions. I would have liked to see the conclusions numbers. I got 10, and I will send you, let's say, my comments later on. There's no time now, certainly. I am convinced this is a very serious research. This research opens the door what I would love to see as a brilliant academic career for you. And I'm convinced, and I finish with this, that the European Commission should read very attentively this thesis and pay attention to the conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you. Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question, and that allows me to elaborate a bit more on the aspects of tradition and traditional know-how, traditional knowledge when it comes to non-agricultural products that I just briefly mentioned in my presentation. Indeed, if I might go back to this slide, you can see that I just considered the peak of the pyramid, and the reason why some products could, in my opinion, be protected as PDOs. But the traditional narrative is indeed that by sui generis right, it would be possible to protect also all the other products, having a strong connection, or maybe a certain connection with the territory on the basis of human factors. And that's where all this element of tradition enters into place. Then in the academic literature is possible to find also a certain criticism on the basis of linking the product to its origin by way of human factors alone. The fact that human factors are mainly people, and people can move from one place to the other one. And that's why, in my opinion, we cannot consider just a single person or a single artisan doing an handicraft product, but we should enlarge with the scope and consider also the community of producers. So how likely is that the entire community is going to move? Is a product produced outside the area by a single person be the same product that is produced by a community? Is the person integrated in the community, is benefiting of an exchange with all the other workers? Is this way of producing influenced in the same way and to the same extent? Well, in my opinion, probably not. So that's also another point of reflection, in my opinion, that should be added to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. It's fine.
Thank you so much. The opposition will now be continued by Professor Van Engelen, who is Professor of Intellectual Property Law Litigation and Transaction Practice at our university, and who is also a member of the Assessment Committee.
Thank you. As esteemed candidate, let me congratulate you on a very well written and researched thesis. It's not many times in law that we use empirical data, and it certainly makes sense to do so. However, my question is not about the empirical data. It's more about the title of your thesis and also one of your propositions, number 5, where you state that tradition and innovation are deeply intertwined. Tradition and innovation to me seem like two opposites. So if you deeply intertwine them, that makes me wonder, where am I? What's happening here? I have the feeling that you seem to suggest that GIs can facilitate, innovation and might even stimulate it. And it's with the latter that I have a problem. It seems to me that your research shows that, at least I don't find any data on the GI actually stimulating innovation. What I do find is that once people come up with an innovation to their established GI, it's not necessarily killed on the spot, but it may be able to amend the requirements for the GI, but it will lead you through a long bureaucratic process. And bureaucracies and innovation to me also seem like two different planets again. So my conclusion is that in the end, the GIs still function, in my mind, as a disincentive for innovation, but do not completely kill it. Do you agree with that position?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your very interesting question. Indeed, in the part of the analysis for the amendments, I came across many references to innovation. And that's why I said that traditional innovation, even if at first for me it was something completely different, they are intertwined, so they are connected. This because innovation took place in the life of a product, in several products, in at least 3 steps. Once in the history of the product, when the product was created, innovation allowed to give to producers something different from the other producers located outside the area. Thinking of an example, the movable hives for Miel de Galicia that at a certain point in time were adopted and allowed to move these bees around in the region and giving to producers this competitive advantage. But not only, innovation can take place also in the moment when the product specifications are drafted, because we are gathering together producers and they are agreeing on a common standard. I'm not referring in the sense of innovation in the patent terms. So it's not something that is completely new in the sky, but it's something that is implemented maybe for the first time in a community or in a company. In this sense, it's possible to find examples of innovations. And then, of course, with the amendments. So it's possible that these producers, all together, they agree to change these product specifications, adopting new standards. That's how I consider the relation between tradition and innovation. Of course, GIs are not a magic box that will allow to solve problems and foster innovation, so I don't see so clearly and blatantly like that. But in my opinion, just a matter of example, innovation is possible also outside the GI world. If it was not possible, we won't have examples of the super Tuscans, for example. So I believe that there's a component of innovation in the GIs as well, all along their history, not only starting from their registration, but even before, and currently with the amendments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then the opposition will be continued by Dr. Margellos. Dr. Margellos is the former president of the European Union Intellectual Property Boards of Appeal, and he is also a member of the Assessment Committee. He is joining us online for this academic ceremony, and I would like to welcome him very much to Maastricht today. Very good to have you, and you have the floor. And I should ask you to unmute. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your kind words. It's a pleasure also for me to be with you today and participate to this oral defense of this very, very interesting thesis. Esteemed candidates, in my turn, I would like to congratulate you for this study, for this work. You have done a lot of research, so you have done a lot of work, and the results of that work are not only very, very interesting, but as it was said, academically very, very stimulating. And I hope, and in that I completely share what Professor De Santis said. I would say that he read my mind. It would wish that this work would be also has a stimulating effect for the Commission. It would be a good thing that this work can be reached, can reach the Commission and be read by the competent persons. They are who are drafting the legislative proposals, drafting the legislative propositions of the Commission. It could be indeed very, very useful, because it is indeed, we know that the system, I would not say it doesn't function, but it has a lot of difficulties in its functioning. It is dysfunctioning, and I thought before that talking about GIs and applying the system was very, very boring. I have changed my mind reading your thesis, and I thank you for that, and I again congratulate you for your work. I have especially appreciated your recommendations, your policy recommendations, and I had on this some questions which in your presentations have been in a considerable amount have been answered. I would like nevertheless to ask you to expand a little bit on what is your position in considering the new proposals of the Commission, especially the proposal on craft and industrial products, and also to tell us how these legislative proposals and your policy recommendations, if taken into consideration, would improve the European Union's ability to defend its geographical indications, not only in the internal market, but also outside Europe. Thank you.
Esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. Indeed, the proposal made by the European Commission focus on one single link to origin, so the PGI, as I mentioned in my presentation. And by reading further also all the documents accompanying this proposal, it seems that this choice had been made with regard to the fact that the majority of craft and industrial products, they call them non-agricultural products, could have benefited a PGI scheme rather than a PDO. That's what surprised me indeed, because it's a matter of consistency. I would have opted for a twofold link to origin like it's already in place for agricultural products and foodstuff, for example. Plus, I firmly believe that this will increase not only the consistency but also the visibility of the scheme. Indeed, if consumers are confronted with these schemes adopted in a consistent manner for various products, this will help indeed the EU legislator to reach what their main objective, because there are many the discussion on the usefulness, on the visibility of the science, there are questionnaires that have been extensively made, showing that people don't recognize the various logos of the quality logos of the Commission. It seems that it's a system that is mainly addressing a portion of the European population, so countries with a traditional interest and understanding for the system of origin, like France, Spain, Italy, for example. So in thank you.
In that case, the opposition will be continued by Dr. Marie-Vivien. Dr. Marie-Vivien is a researcher at the Centre de Coopération Internationale en Recherche Agronomique pour le Développement. And she is also a member of the assessment committee, and I would like to welcome her also very much to Maastricht University today. Very good to have you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Esteemed candidate, dear Maurizio, I'm really pleased to be here, and I really like to start with congratulating you for this excellent research. It's an impressive set of data that you have been analyzing on all the aspects related to the EU policy on GIs. And really at the right time, because there has just been two proposals of new regulations that were published last March regarding the EU policy on geographical indication. And this work is not only important for the EU and the EU Commission, but also for the third countries who are more and more interested in registering their GIs in the EU. So for both European countries and foreign countries, your work is really important, and I hope it will be published in several scientific papers. My questions now is related to the logos and to the scope of protection. You mentioned again in your presentation that you support the fact of having a logo for the GIs for non-agri food products. Those logos are already mandatory for food products. And indeed, in the new proposals, the PDO-PGI distinction is mainly on the logos and the definition, because it was decided to keep with the same level of protection. So finally, what will be really different in the market will be those logos, as the enforcement rights will be the same for all producers and all GIs and PDOs. So then the advantage would be for PDOs to have a logo which right now is more recognized in the market by the consumers. But this is right now. So the question is whether this focus on the logos is really a good thing. What do you think of this situation of having as the only difference the logo between PDO and PGIs? Isn't this giving too much importance to those logos, like in any other certification schemes, the prejudice of the protection of the name, which is the object of this intellectual property right? What would happen if in 10 years the PGI logo is as recognized as the PDO logo? Would that mean that then there's really no need of those two different signs, PDO and PGIs? So finally, the question would be whether we should not come back of having really a different scope of protection. If it is clear what are the differences between PDO and PGIs in the definition, if you have a different scope of protection, that might really stop this blurring of definition. And I wanted to ask you whether you think it would be feasible to have the actual Lisbon system protection for PGIs, so including with the imitation and using type, misleading words, and having the evocation scope of protection that is growing now in the EU, only for PDOs. So I would like to ask you both about this, about what happens if the logo are also blurred within a time period of 10 or 15 years, and then how to think of different scope of protection that is acceptable for producers. Thank you.
esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. Indeed, the problem of the blurred difference between PGOs and PGIs is clear to me, and also the fact that in the future we might assist to way more PGIs than PDOs, increasing maybe the visibility of just one single quality scheme at the detriment of the other one. In this scenario, I've considered also the possibility to give a different protection to PDOs compared to PGIs. Of course, on the basis of policy objectives, this would be completely against all the recent work of the Commission, and I'm not sure if this is likely to happen, but in terms of, for sure, academic discussion and policy advice, this is something that I have considered. In particular, on my work, I referred more to the TRIPS agreement and maybe the possibility of giving a certain protection under Article 22 to PGIs and the protection of Article 23 to PDOs. So protection also against using expression like style, method, together with the name of the product. The idea of giving a protection against evocation, for example, only to PDOs, in my opinion, is interesting because will allow indeed to have an incentive for producers to direct themselves to the correct quality scheme. The problem here is more related to a work of reconsidering also all the logos that have been attributed so far, reconsidering all the thousands of GIs in the register and the request for amendments that is going to face once there's a strong incentive to go for a different quality scheme in this sense. And then another problem will be how to justify this different protection, because so far all the discussion of the Commission has been oriented in saying that PDOs and PGIs indeed we can't say that a quality scheme is better than the other one. So there's only a difference regarding the strength of the link to origin. Nothing is said having regard to the quality. And there's on the web page of the Spanish ministries, there's a reference in this saying that PDOs and PGIs are both good products in the sense. So the explanation for giving a stronger protection to PDOs would be indeed linked to the link to origin, since they have a stronger link and they are, let's say, unique compared to maybe PGIs that have elements coming from elsewhere. Then they would benefit a stronger protection in this sense. But definitely requires more reflection also from my side to this topic. Thank you.
The opposition will now be continued by Professor Bazir, who is Professor of Intellectual Property Law at the Université de Strasbourg, and who is also a member of the Assessment Committee. Professor Bazir is unfortunately not here today, but his question will be read by Professor Heath.
Thank you very much. Dear candidate, esteemed candidate, would you be prepared to answer a question in French, or at least to listen to the question in French and then answer in the language that you prefer?
Yes, I'm
very well. Then I will read to you the question that Professor Bazir would like to ask, and that is indeed in French. Now, he asks, comment assurer la coexistence et plus encore l'harmonie entre les marques de qualité, de certification comme le label rouge en France, et les indications géographiques?
If I may answer in French for Professor Bazir in case he will.
You may also answer in English.
Yeah?
You may also answer in English.
In English.
Whatever your preference is.
Oh, okay. I will stick to French then, if possible.
Please.
Je veux remercier tout d'abord le professeur Yann Bazir pour cette question, qui est en fait vraiment intéressant et permet de développer autre aspect de la recherche que j'ai amené et que je voudrais amener aussi dans le futur. Précisément, la coexistence entre les IGP et DOP et d'autres signes de qualité en tant que marque, certification, aussi marque collective, je pense avoir écouté, le label rouge. Effectivement, j'étais assez surpris quand, au début de la recherche, je vais analyser l'indication géographique agricole de tout début de la création du système. En fait, c'est-à-dire les produits qui ont été enregistrés environ en 1996. Pourquoi j'étais surpris? Car en fait, j'ai trouvé qu'il y avait des AOP, des DOP, bien sûr, mais aussi beaucoup des IGP. Et surtout par rapport à la France et à l'Italie. En fait, il s'agissait d'une chose assez étonnante, car à l'époque, en Italie et en France, il n'y avait pas un système des IGP en place, mais seulement le système des DOP. Et c'est pour cette raison que j'ai essayé d'analyser un peu mieux en détail et trouver la raison pour laquelle la France, par exemple, a amené si beaucoup de produits, et on parle d'au moins 50 ans de produits en tant qu'IGP. Et la raison était qu'effectivement, ils ont pu présenter en tant qu'IGP des produits qui étaient enregistrés à l'époque en tant que rabais rouge ou une label régional, aussi une certification de conformité. Et ça nous fait penser aussi par rapport à la coexistence, le fait que ces producteurs ont voulu entrer dans le système des DSIG. Peut-être c'était aussi un choix peut-être politique à l'époque, un système qui venait d'être créé, c'était très facile de pouvoir y entrer. Et ça, c'est en fait la réponse que j'ai eue par rapport à certains entretiens que j'ai menés avec les producteurs, en disant, comme il y avait l'option, pourquoi pas en profiter. Après, ces systèmes en fait sont entrés en coexistence et on peut trouver un label rouge par exemple qui existe encore aujourd'hui et qui est assez reconnu, qui en fait a une vision différente par rapport à celle des indications géographiques. C'est pas par rapport à l'intensité du lien à l'origine, mais c'est plutôt par rapport expressement à la qualité des produits. Le fait que certains produits ont une qualité différente de la moyenne vont respecter certains standards qualitatifs. Et donc, à mon avis, c'est possible de permettre la coexistence entre ces signes dans le sens que vont s'adresser à des situations différentes. Et effectivement, ça serait aussi une façon pour permettre aux législateurs européens de comprendre l'importance de résoudre tous les problèmes et toutes les incohérences qu'il y a dans les systèmes des IGP par la façon dans laquelle les producteurs même puissent avoir un intérêt à la protection en tant qu'indication géographique vis-à-vis les consommateurs, pas seulement la protection juridique qui est très extense par rapport aux IGP et DOP. Merci.
Merci beaucoup et je suis permis de continuer une petite question ensuite de ça. Est-ce que vous savez, est-ce que vous connaissez s'il y a des marques de qualité, le label rouge, aussi dans d'autres pays de l'Europe?
Vous dites des marques qui permettent de reconnaître la qualité du produit et pas les liens à l'origine, plutôt. Non, ça c'est pas à ma connaissance, mais je vous avoue que je ne suis pas entré dans ces sujets de la thèse. Donc ça serait plutôt pour une autre recherche que je pourrais amener. Merci.
Merci à vous. Now I'm very happy to allow Professor De Santis to raise a second question in case you would like to do so.
Welcome. I didn't expect it. It will be, I have a lot of questions, but just one. Something happened 6 months ago, yeah? April 2022, the European Commission brought at last a new proposal. You have brought the proposal a little bit, yes, within the research. I understand that this arrived at the very, very last minute. What I would like you, in a nutshell, is to know whether the proposal satisfies your expectations. The proposal dealing with non-agriculture products, yeah, that came after so many years of research and of asking everybody to give their opinions, whether it satisfies, whether it fits with what you propose in the thesis, and then to what extent. It has to be very brief, to a very wide question, I know.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. Indeed, let's say the work for this regulation, for this proposal, started in 2012, if I'm not wrong, so many years ago. And the feeling I had by reading all the studies that were published in this matter is that the European Commission was somehow taking some time to arrive to a proposal. And then all of a sudden there was a kind of a need to come out with a proposal. And the fact was not the bilateral agreements maybe with Peru or Colombia, but the recent agreement with China that pushed the interest of the Commission to indeed come out with a serious effort and present a solid proposal in order to give protection at the EU level to this kind of rights. As I said, the main elements that do not satisfy me in this proposal are the fact not really the single link to origin compared to the twofold one, because also the single one will be accepted, and is the one that is the option chosen at the French national level. There's just a single link to origin, but mainly the reasons why this has been done, which is the very few products that might enjoy a protection as PDOs. I don't see any extra burden for the EU legislator or for the Commission or whatever other body or agency of the EU who's going to be in charge of the registration of non-agricultural GIs to opt also for a second path for PDOs. And then again, of course, the issue of the visibility of the signs and the compulsory use of a sign, because in my opinion, it's not being adequately taken into account that this will create a problem in terms of inconsistency with other systems in place for other products. And actually, in the past, we had voluntary base in the use of the logo that then switched to the compulsory use just to balance and to allow these signs to be visible, face the consumer. So these are the 2 points, in my opinion, that should be maybe reflected a bit deeper, a bit in depth when it comes to this recent proposal. Thank you.
Then I'm happy to allow Dr. Marie-Vivien to raise a second question, either in French or in English.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So quickly, esteemed candidate, one of the differences between PDO and PGIs is the origin of the raw material. So there's the issue of the labeling on the packaging of the origin of the raw material in case it's not coming from the same geographical area as the other step of production. So do you have any suggestion in terms of how this labeling should be implemented? Should it be mandatory to mention that the raw materials are coming from outside the geographical area of the PGI? At which level should it be mentioned, at country level, region level, or only mentioning it's from the EU or outside the EU? Should it be on the front side of the packaging next to the PDO PGI logo, or only in the list of ingredients? I don't know whether you had any reflection on this labeling of the origin of the raw material.
Esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. Indeed, you're raising an interesting point, because starting from the exception under Article 5.3 of the regulation, and considering, for example, processed meat products, ham, we can see that there's a huge difference in terms of products considered, like, for example, in the case of the Parma ham.
You may briefly conclude your reply.
Thank you. We can see that there are, for example, in the case of the Parma ham, pigs that do not come at all from Parma, but from a bit everywhere in Italy. And so, is this an important information for the consumer to know? Well, I think so. And that's why it should be taken into account in the labeling, the source of the raw materials, the place where these raw materials come from, with the possibly detailed information on it. Thank you.
Maurizio Crupi. The time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and the quality of your defense. I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return in this room.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes. In the meantime, let's take a closer look at Maastricht University's renowned teaching method, problem-based learning. Once the pro-rector reconvenes the session, we'll tune in and continue the live stream.
Problem-based learning, or PBL. What does that mean exactly? 3 of my fellow students and I will show you around. Every week, we analyze a different case or issue together. We discuss the case and everyone can contribute different perspectives to the group discussion. If we get stuck, our tutor helps us out and suggests what we could do next. I prefer going to the library to prepare. Here, I can focus and I have quick access to books or journals that help me understand the case. Today, I can also train my stitching skills in the Skills Lab, where you can immediately put into practice what you've learned. After a day like this, I like going to the gym to clear my head and get ready for the next day.
At UM, you meet people from all around the world. Hello guys. Some of them are doing their exchange semester here, and they often say that PBL helps them learn and retain things very easily. I can understand why. It's a very active way of learning because you have to bring your own perspective to real-life cases. You have a lot of freedom to manage your time, your studies, your hobbies, and your work. Of course, that also means a lot of responsibility. Right now, for example, I'm arranging my exchange semester in Madrid. How cool is that? In this group session, we're the managers who have to allocate the resources of a real company. This is how we put into practice what we learned this morning. Studying here means being proactive and learning to plan well. Prioritizing and performing well under stress are great skills that help you develop as a person. But now, it's time to grab a coffee at the Student Service Center.
Right now, we're at the Brightlands Camelot campus. Here we can apply knowledge from lectures and tutorials in a practical setting. This helps us understand what we have learned and further develop our lab skills. Today, we're determining the amounts of cholesterol in various products. What I really like is the project periods at the end of each semester, where we complete a full research project. That includes planning, collecting data, analyzing, and presenting the findings. That way we learn how research works and we're able to see what it's like to be a real scientist. After practicals, I have to write a lab report that also helps me process everything I have learned today. UM has a lot of learning spaces where you can work on your own or with other students. This evening, I'm meeting my friends for a movie night organized by the MSP Study Association.
If you study law, you have to read quite a lot. Not all information is relevant, so you learn how to easily find the information you need to solve your case. In the afternoon, I have to give a presentation, so I like to practice it with a fellow student. Later today, a lawyer is giving a lecture. This will help us better understand the case we're working on. Speaking in front of a group is quite exciting the first time round, but you get used to it quickly. And having to present helps you also to adopt knowledge better. What I like the most is that we sometimes get to enter a plea in front of a real judge. These moot courts are really exciting. Now it's time for drinks with friends. Studying is important, but so is relaxing once in a while.
Maurizio Crupi. The degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and the quality of your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taken into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Kamperman-Sanders is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. And I now invite your supervisor to take the floor.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
We promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Maurizio Crupi, the degree of doctor and grant you all the rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate, signed by the rector, the secretary, and other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university. Congratulations.
Dear Dr. Crupi, dear Maurizio, it's a great pleasure for me to congratulate you today, the first person to congratulate you as a doctor, the highest academic degree. I would like to also congratulate and especially your family and friends here, and I would like to thank all the members of the jury. I would like to thank also the prorector for his hospitality here in Maastricht. You finished today a very long process, and this process has not very easy always. From the very first moment I met you at the University of Alicante, I knew you were a very special student. You have done a very impressive career. After a combined bachelor and master, laurea in jurisprudence in Milano, IP master in Alicante, you have covered all the areas of the IP practice also in highest top-level firms and also in European institutions, as for instance UIPO and now the Court of Justice. But your desire to improve your knowledge and your strong international desire moved you to apply for a PhD, Marie Curie European Doctorate at the Apin Innovaton Society. And I will never forget the day in which you have been selected as beneficiary of this scholarship, and I have been assigned as your supervisor together with Ansen Kamperman and Anke Moreland. After those years of intense research work, I can testify the excellence of your work. You have done a great research of fascinating, economically very relevant but very difficult topic, geographical indication. One of your great talent is that you have not been afraid to cover one of the main issues faced by this APR, offering a deep study of the link to the origin, which is a cornerstone regarding this legal regime. As if this complexity were not enough, you have faced during your research several reforms at the EU level, as the geographical indication is an IPR in development. And you have presented, as we have seen, conclusion and proposition for legal revision at the EU legal regime regarding agricultural and non-agricultural products. The impact of your work is clear, we have heard in this room, as we are facing nowadays a new reform regarding both sides of the thesis. And this is the main scope of an academic PhD, to present well-founded proposition in order to improve the state of the law. As a privileged witness of your research, I have observed in you an exceptional commitment and responsibility with all the university duties as a PhD. You have demonstrated an excellent disposition to doing your research, always looking for the best papers, particularly also jurisprudence, and in this case also you're sharing your findings with the GI producer, which I think is a very innovative way to do this kind of research. As part of those academic duties, you have presented also your work in several congresses and seminars. I remember in this regard your presentation at the Regulatory Council at Gijón, Alicante. Following the project provision, you have completed also several research visits to important institutions, for instance, the CIGAD, Delphine, and also Origin with Massimo and Ida. You have also spent time writing scientific articles, and this by switching from English, we have seen, to French, to Spanish, and to Italian. I would like to finalize my intervention highlighting your personality traits, as I think is one of the more valuable assets you have for your future career. During those years, you have demonstrated yourself as a good fellow, good friend, always ready to help, without sparing any efforts and without schedule. In this regard, you know you are an important and very much loved member of our department, our university, and we will be always happy to work with you. As supervisor, I must confess that working with you has been a privilege from both a personal and professional point of view. And it's for that reason I would like to congratulate you again, and I am happy to give the floor to Anke Moreland as your second institution. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Maurizio, my wholehearted congratulations to you, the young doctor. It is a particular pleasure to me to see you stand here today speaking about a topic that is also very dear to my heart, as you know, the protection of geographical indications and what the link with a territory is really about. In fact, you are the first PhD candidate that I have co-supervised on GI protection, and it has been a true privilege. It is obvious that you must have an intrinsic interest in fine food and drinks, but also a very special drive and ability to dig deep into the qualitative and quantitative data to study the law in its culinary and real-life context. The topic of your research was very much aligned with the overall purpose of the IPEN Innovation Society project, namely studying how GI law foresees and enables innovation within the protected product specifications. We all witnessed here today that you have been able to provide a convincing piece of research that this is possible. But you've done even more than that. You have really provided the data for lots of other scholars to actually look deeper into this topic. And next to that, went in so many other topics that we didn't foresee originally, that now only popped up, and you actually taught us so much about the aspects of law in the actual link with the origin, but also looking at the free trade agreements and how these procedures are really in desperate repair need, I would say. And we've heard that today. The journey of writing a PhD thesis has been quite a challenge, but I hope overall a rewarding experience. It was challenging for several reasons. I will not speak about how difficult it must have been to work together with 3 different supervisors. One reason was that you were part of a research and training network that needed to comply with a lot of obligations and deliverables monitored by the European Commission. Having coordinated this project myself, I can confess it has been a huge challenge for me as well. But I really admired your ability to always stay calm. We have seen this today as well, maybe only from the outside, but nevertheless extremely positive. Keep a very professional attitude in your communication, show independence and maturity by asking for advice when in need, and pursuing the choices made, which is really not easy. It was a true pleasure seeing your research develop into a genuinely original and innovative way. Now, the time as a PhD researcher has really come to an end. It is with a tear and a smile that I have seen you leave academia to work with the Court of Justice of the European Union. I wish you all the possible success in your professional and personal life, and rest reassured, should you join academia again or wish to pursue your research ambitions further, nevertheless, which of course I very much hope, I would be thrilled to work together with you again, Dr. Crupi.
Dear Dr. Crupi, also on behalf of Maastricht University and its Faculty of Law, many congratulations on the degree that you have just acquired. As one of your supervisors already mentioned in her laudatio, this is indeed the highest degree we have available at this university. Summus honoris, it says on your diploma, that you will get to study somewhat later today. Many congratulations to you, congratulations to your supervisors, and also to all your family and friends present either here in the aula or watching this ceremony online through the live stream. What we're still going to do is to take the traditional photo, and that we're going to do right here in this room, also therefore allowing Dr. Margellos to be present at the photo. After that, we are going to the reception where there's ample possibility to congratulate the young doctor. And with this, I close this academic ceremony. And your supervisors and all the committee members.